I will be going over the hardware equipment that interested me the most, which was the motherboard. Chose the motherboard because basically everything about any hardware piece has to be connected to the motherboard, so that makes it one of the most important pieces of the computer. Um, a motherboard is a sheet of plastic that holds all the circuitry to connect the various components of a computer system. Um, by definition, a motherboard is one of the most essential parts of a computer system. It holds together many of the crucial components of a computer, including the CPU, memory, and connectors for input and output devices. The base of a motherboard consists of a very firm sheet of non-conductive material, typically some type of rigid plastic. Thin layers of copper or aluminum foil, referred to as traces, are printed onto this sheet. These traces are very narrow and form the circuits between the various components. In addition to circuits, a motherboard contains a number of sockets and slots to connect the other components, which we went over in class, which may be sound card, graphics card, um, anything of that nature. Some of the parts of a motherboard. So if you open it up, um, take it out the motherboard, you'll have the plastic ragged, um, the plastic sheet for the components, known as the motherboard, and basically the parts would be the CPU socket, which holds the CPU, which is basically the brains of the computer. A power connector to distribute power to the CPU and the other components. Slots for the system's main memory, typically in the form of DRAM chips. Chip forms an interface between the CPU, the main memory, and other components. On many types of motherboards, this is referred to as the North Bridge. This chip also contains a large heatsink. A second chip controls the input and output functions. It is not connected directly to the CPU, but to the North Bridge. This is input-output controller is referred to as the South Bridge. The North Bridge and South Bridge combined are referred to as the chipset. Several connectors, which provide the physical interface between input and output devices and the motherboard. The South Bridge handles these connections. Slots for one or more hard drives to store files. The most common types of connectors are IDEs, which is Integrated Drive Electronics, and SATA, Serial Advanced Technology Attachments. A read-only memory, basically a ROM chip, which contains the firmware or startup instructions for the computer system. This is also called the BIOS. A slot for a video or graphics card, which we talked about earlier. There are a number of different types of slots, including the accelerated graphics port (AGP) and peripheral component interconnect express (PCIe). Additional slots to connect hardware in the form of PCI slots as well are some more parts of which are on the motherboard. There are actually a lot of acronyms to get used to when you're looking at the motherboard. Just from the few terms that I said, I've given you a few of them. Don't worry too much about remembering them. The key is to remember that the motherboard contains the CPU, the memory, and the connectors to the rest of the hardware of the computer system. The board is the mother of all components, which is where it gets its name. This piece of hardware, as I stated earlier, was the most interesting to me because everything dealing with technology, stems from the motherboard, which makes me want to find out more about it. And The more I know about the motherboard, the more I can use it to help me maybe build a computer down the line or something like that. Because I feel like that's one of the first pieces you should really understand before going into building a computer, which I've learned from taking this course. And that's my presentation on my hardware and which interested me.